Hi there, my name is Loki, and I recently decided to try my hand at making some YouTube videos narrating some of the cooler, ridiculous stories from my D&D group. However, since this is my first time attempting anything YouTube related, I figured it would be best to start out with something a bit more simple to get some practice. So for my first video, I'm going to recount a few of the wild magic surges caused by my Wild Magic Sorcerer Malcer throughout the campaign. I figured it would be fitting to start with the first wild magic surge of the campaign. Our party first met each other after each of us came to the aid of an acolyte of Torm who was getting mugged in the back alley by a group of thugs. After taking care of the thugs, the acolyte told us that he had been investigating a spree of missing orphan cases that had been plaguing the city of Cauldron before he had been attacked. We agreed to help him with his investigation, and we eventually discovered that the locks had been changed at the orphanage only a couple of days before the most recent disappearance. It didn't take long for us to find the only locksmith in the city, and we decided to go question him. However, our interrogation was interrupted when we saw a goblin poking his head out of a hidden trap door in the corner of the shop. It seemed like the goblin was just as surprised as us, since he quickly tried to duck back down. I decided to ask the DM if Malcer would be able to fire off a spell before the goblin could shut the trap door, and he decided to have us roll initiative. Fortunately, Malcer went first, so he cast Magic Missile at the goblin and then, poof! Suddenly where Malcer had just been standing was a potted plant. Afterwards, the goblin, having survived the spell, retreated beneath the trapdoor. Following that strange scene, the rest of the party just stood there confused as they stared at the potted plant that had replaced their new acquaintance. After the round passed, Malcer proceeded to turn back into a human before looking awkwardly around at the rest of the party and saying, "Oh yeah, that was, you know what, don't worry about that, I'm fine. Shouldn't we be chasing after that goblin?" before he dashed towards the trapdoor. Sure, it was a fairly standard wild magic surge, but it did a pretty good job introducing the rest of the party to the weirdness that Malcer was prone to. This one comes from around halfway into the campaign. We had recently discovered a plot to open up a portal to the Abyss in the middle of the city of Cauldron. For those of you that don't know, the Abyss is a chaotic evil plane made up of infinite layers where various demon lords command their armies of lesser demons in endless wars against each other, with the occasional invasion into other planes when they get bored of killing each other, of course. So a portal connecting to the Abyss in the middle of our favorite city was definitely bad news, and since we had already put so much effort into saving the city several times already, we definitely weren't going to let all that hard work go to waste because some insane cultist thought it was a good idea to let a bunch of bloodthirsty demons into the material plane. After some research, we learned of a lovely place called the Demon Scar that wasn't too far away from Cauldron. Apparently, the Demon Scar had been warped and twisted by a previous failed demon invasion that happened several hundred years ago. It also seemed like the group that we were currently trying to thwart had some ties to whoever had been behind the events that created the Demon Scar, so we figured it'd be a good place to find some leads. After a long session of traveling, exploration, and fending off a few ambushes, we found a naturally smooth circular tunnel that seemed to lead into the Demon Scar, so we entered. Eventually, the tunnels opened up into a larger chamber, where we got into a fight with a bunch of steam methods. Basically little pixie-like creatures made out of steam. Unfortunately, at the start of the fairly easy fight, Malcer set off a wild magic surge that caused the nearest corpse to reanimate before seeking him out to attack him. Upon seeing the surge, the DM says, "Oh, give me a moment as I figure this out," and a few seconds later he just started laughing. When we asked him what happened, he just told us to continue with the fight, so we did. Once all the methods had been dealt with and we got ready to head further into the cave, the DM spoke up and told us that we could hear a loud rumbling and what sounded like several deep guttural voices coming from that direction. It quickly became apparent that whatever was causing the noises was getting closer. A few moments later we saw a single reanimated skeleton rush into the cave, with a large pack of hill giants, ettins, and a fire giant in close pursuit. There was no way we could have been able to take them all on at once. Luckily, with the help of a well-placed illusion cast by our wizard, a human named Eldro, we were able to escape and find a place to hide until things calmed down. Afterwards, the DM told us that the closest corpse had been towards the end of the dungeon, and its mad dash through the entire cave system had caused all the monsters that lived there to follow in curiosity. This story isn't about a single wild magic surge, but rather a funny pattern of surges that emerge over the course of the campaign. Since the campaign revolved around a single city, it didn't take long for our group to find ourselves a regular drinking spot, the Drunken Markoth. It became sort of a tradition to head there to either have some celebratory drinks after a big victory, or calm our nerves with some alcohol after a traumatic near-death experience. Well, at least that's what the rest of the party did. Malcer's wild magic had other plans for him. Aside from 1 or 2 times, before each of our drinking sessions, Malcer would cause a wild magic surge that made him immune to the intoxicating effects of alcohol for 5d6 days. The first time wasn't too bad. Malcer was even able to use his alcohol immunity to swindle a victory out of a drinking competition. However, Malcer grew more resentful each time he was forced to watch the rest of the party down some drinks without being able to join in. It really added insult to injury being forced into sobriety when even Dragon, the normally straight-edged Dragonborn paladin, is throwing back and getting into booze-filled hijinks. The worst of Malcer's periods of forced sobriety happened when everyone else was drinking to forget the fact that the lifeless body of Anders, a half-elf druid, was currently surrounded by a cocoon created by the strange magic armor she had been wearing. At the time, we had no idea what the cocoon was doing to her body, and it was the first player character death that our party had dealt with. Malcer's mood was so bad that the halfling monk Very even pitched the idea of trying to find some other drug for Malcer since the wild magic surge only affected alcohol immunity. Yeah, he wasn't exactly a conventional monk. Luckily, we discovered later that the cocoon created by Anders' armor was actually bringing her back to life, with just a few side effects. Like permanently changing her skin and hair green even when she shifted into animal form, as well as physical discomfort whenever she was around any non-natural structures. It honestly felt good to Malcer to see another party member having to deal with some strange shit for once. Well, that's it for now. I hope you enjoyed the video. I am planning on making my next video a more focused and detailed narrative for my party's adventures, but I wouldn't be surprised if I end up making a few more of these later on since there are a ton of ridiculous wild magic surges from throughout the campaign.